Hey, Kentley here, checking in and reading you the final chapter of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, chapter 62, A Visitor. What I have proposed to record is nearly finished, but there is yet an incident conspicuous in my memory, on which it often rests with delight, and without which one thread of the web I have spun would have a ravelled end. I had advanced in fame and fortune. My domestic joy was perfect. I had been married 10 happy years. Agnes and I were sitting by the fire in our house in London one night in spring, and 3 of our children were playing in the room when I was told that a stranger wished to see me. He had been asked if he came on business and had answered no. He had come for the pleasure of seeing me, and had come a long way. He was an old man, my servant said, and looked like a farmer. And this sounded mysterious to the children, and moreover was like the beginning of a favorite story Agnes used to tell them. Introductory on the arrival of a wicked old fairy in a cloak who hated everybody, it produced some commotion. One of our boys laid his head on his mother's lap to be out of harm's way, and little Agnes, our eldest child, left her doll in a chair to represent her, and thrust out her little heap of golden curls from between the window curtains to see what happened next. "Let him come in here," said I. There soon appeared, pausing in the dark doorway as he entered, a hale, grey-haired old man. Little Agnes, attracted by his looks, had run to bring him in, and had not yet clearly seen his face, when my wife, starting up, cried out to me in a pleased and agitated voice that it was Mr. Peggotty. It was Mr. Peggotty, an old man now, but in a ruddy, hearty, strong old age. When our first emotion was over, he sat before the fire with the children on his knees, and the blaze shining on his face. He looked to me as vigorous and robust, withal and handsome an old man as ever I had seen. "Master Davy," said he, and the old name and the old tone fell so naturally on my ear. "Master Davy, 'tis a joyful hour as I see you once more, long with your own true wife." "A joyful hour indeed, old friend," cried I. "And these here pretty ones," said Mr. Peggotty, "to look at these here flowers. Why, Master Davy, you was but the height of the littlest of these when I first see you, when Emily weren't no bigger, and our poor lad were but a lad." "Time has changed me more than it has changed you since then," said I. "But let these dear rogues go to bed. There is no house in England but this must hold you. Tell me where to send for your luggage. Is the old black bag among it that went so far, I wonder? And, over a glass of Yarmouth grog, we will have the tidings of 10 years. We sat in between us, not knowing how to give him welcome enough, and as I began to listen to his old familiar voice, I could have fancied he was still pursuing his long journey in search of his darling niece. "And now tell us," said I, "everything relating to your fortunes." "Our fortunes, Master Davy," he rejoined, "is soon told. We haven't fared nohows, but fared to thrive. We've allus thrived. We've worked as we ought to, and maybe we lived a little hard at first, or so. But we have allus thrived. What with sheep farming, and what with stock farming, and what with one thing, and what with t'other. We are as well to do as well could be. There's been kinder a blessing fell upon us," said Mr. Peggotty, reverently inclining his head, "and we've done naught but prosper. That is, in the long run. If not yesterday, why then today? If not today, why then tomorrow." "And Emily," said Agnes and I both together. "Some thinks," he said, "as her affection was ill bestowed. Some as her marriage was broke off by death. No one knows how 'tis. She might have married well a mort of times, but, uncle, she says to me, that's gone forever. Cheerful along with me, retired when others is by, fond of going any distance for to teach a child, or for to tend a sick person, or for to do some kindness toward a young girl's wedding, and she's done a many, but never has seen one. Fondly loving with her uncle, patient, liked by young and old, sowed out by all that has any trouble. That's Emily." He drew up his hand across his face, and with a half-suppressed sigh looked up from the fire. Is Martha with you yet? I asked. Martha, he replied, got married, Master Davy, in the 2nd year. A young man, a farm labourer, has come by us on his way to market with his master's drays, a journey of over 500 mile, there and back, made offers for to take her for his wife. Wives is very scarce there. And then to set up for their 2 selves in the bush. She spoke to me for to tell him her true story. I did. They was married, and they live 400 miles away from any voices but their own and the singing birds. Mrs. Gummidge, I suggested. It was a pleasant key to touch, for Mr. Peggotty suddenly burst into a roar of laughter and rubbed his hands up and down his legs, as he had been accustomed to do when he enjoyed himself in the long shipwrecked boat. "Ha, ha, ha, ha! Would you believe it?" he said. "Why, someone even made offers for to marry her. If a ship's cook that was turning settler, Master Davy, didn't make offers for to marry Mrs. Gummidge, I'm gormed, and I can't say no fairer than that." I never saw Agnes laugh so. This sudden ecstasy on the part of Mr. Peggotty was so delightful to her that she could not leave off laughing, and the more she laughed, the more she made me laugh, and the greater Mr. Peggotty's ecstasy became, and the more he rubbed his legs. "And what did Mrs. Gummidge say?" I asked when I was grave enough. "If you'll believe me," returned Peggotty, "Mrs. Gummidge, instead of saying, 'Thank you, I'm much obleeged to you,' I ain't a-going for to change my condition at my time of life, up with a bucket as was standing by, and laid it over that there ship cook's head till he sung out for help, and I went in and re-skied of him." Mr. Peggotty burst into a great roar of laughter, and Agnes and I both kept him company. Now last not least, Mr. Micawber," said I. He has paid off every obligation he incurred here, even to Traddles' bill, you remember, my dear Agnes, and therefore we may take it for granted that he is doing well. But what is the latest news of him?" Mr. Peggotty, with a smile, put his hand in his breast pocket and produced a flat-folded paper parcel, from which he took out, with much care, a little odd-looking newspaper. "You are to understand, Master Davy," said he, "as we have left the bush now, being so well-to-do, and have gone right away round to Port Midbay Harbour, where there's what we call a town." "Mr. Micawber was in the bush near you?" said I. "Bless you, yes," said Mr. Peggotty, and turned to it with a will. "I never wish to meet a better gentleman for turning to with a will. I've seen that there bald head of his a-perspiring in the sun, Master Davy, till I almost thought it would have melted away, and now he's a magistrate." "A magistrate, eh?" said I. Mr. Peggotty pointed to a certain paragraph in the newspaper, where I read aloud as follows, from the Port Middlebury Times. And we will pause, as I have realized that this is not the last chapter of the book, but we will continue without my face in the frame and finish this chapter with the article from the Port Middlebury Times. I will see you in the next video.